the only thing that's ever going to solve your relationship with Jesus, that lukewarm Christianity, that unintentional living, is you deciding to be hot or cold, not lukewarm. My question for you guys, just right off the hop, is what is the cost to living unintentionally? What is the cost to living unintentionally? A little while ago, I was looking up some stats. These are probably old stats, but they were eye-opening for me. Okay, so these stats came from a fact of they assumed the average lifespan was based on this for 80 years old. That's what it came from. And if you had an average lifespan of 80 years old, they figured that about 33 years of your life will be spent in bed, sleeping. 33 years, okay. So 13 years of your life is spent at work, consistent 13 years. This is the one that made my jaw drop and made me instantly want to change every habit I have that goes to this. But the third one that says is, and this is probably old, 11 years of your life, they say in 2022, and the way that people live their life is spent on your screen, social media, screen time, Netflix binging, whatever it is that you're watching, whatever it is. It's 11 years of your life spent scrolling through a phone is what they figure. And I bet you every single year that we go on, it gets more increased and more increased and more increased. That means 33 years in bed, 13 years at work, 11 years on your phone or in front of a screen, not including work, which means 57 years of your life is spent in bed, social media, or at work. Unbelievable if you really think about it. That means that, again, I'm believing for way past 80, but this is a stat that we came from. It said the average age of 80, okay? So that means 23 years you have left in that life, but besides the 57 that you've already allocated. And that 23 includes school, includes growing up. Unbelievable. If you really think about it, we always think about how much time we have in life. And there is so many things that we can do in life, that we can get, that we can continue on. There's so many things we can do for God in that time frame. Don't let that discourage you, okay? I know all of you are like, holy, it is not much time. No, it's not meant to scare you. Actually, I believe that info has the opportunity for you to take and apply into your life, and you can create the best life absolutely possible. I'd rather have all the info than none of it, because then I can make a good, educated decision on myself to do what I want to do. But it completely made my jaw drop when I found out that 11 years of our life is spent scrolling on a phone or in front of a screen. See, the time in our life is going to fly by, absolutely fly by. Many of us know that. The second you get out of grade 12, you graduate, you go into the workforce, you're an adult, you have kids, you build a family, life flies by. We all know that. Every single year is your new birthday, and they ask you, how old are you turning this year? And you're like, I don't know. I lost count. A lot of us people. I'm only 27, and I'm getting to that point where I'm like, I don't remember. Am I turning 28 this year? Am I turning 27? It's kind of funny how that works, but the point is that life flies by. It really does. And that goes back to this question that I started this message off of, is what is the cost to living that life unintentionally? What is the cost to living that life unintentionally? About 6 or 7, maybe 8 years ago, I watched a movie, and this movie was interesting. This movie was, the best way to describe it would be, instead of having a currency within this movie of money to buy things, to make things when you're at work, those types of things, they don't pay you by money. This movie was about the currency of time. And so the time that you spend, that you make. And so you go to work, and these guys would finish at work, and they'd go to get paid, and they'd get paid in time, more time for their life. So in this movie, it was unbelievable, and in the sense that it really showed you what the value of time is. And it made me start to think to myself, what is it that we spend our time on? What is it that we spend? And if we do spend our time on something, is it unintentional or is it intentional with the way that we spend that time? I think many of us, of course, if you start looking at your life, you will find places that you unintentionally spend time in, which is that we're all human. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to do things that are going to go that way, and that's okay. But what this movie did is it made me realize, oh my goodness, we all get so familiar with the time that we have. Not saying it's short, not saying it's long, it's just time. And what we do with that time is either going to make this life absolutely amazing, it's going to have you walking in the promises of God, or it's going to be you just never being completely content with the life that you live and the way that you go, where you go, the friends that you have, the marriage that you have, the family that you have, the church that you attend, where you volunteer. All of these things start to create the life that God has for you. And God has one of the most amazing lives you could ever imagine in your life right now, but few of us actually walk in that because we live our life so unintentionally. You know, my wife shared a quote a little while ago, and that quote that she found, and it was just saying, choose your hard. That was, I'm sure many of you have heard this quote. It's not mine, but it's choose your hard. That was the premise of this quote. Of this quote, it said, intentional living. If we're talking about unintentional and intentional living is hard right now. It's hard to be intentional with the time that you spend. It's hard to be intentional with everything that we do. But down the road, living a life with consequences of unintentional living is also very hard. Working out is hard. I think everyone knows this. The first little bit of working out really sucks. It's not fun until you get into that mode, that flow. Working out is hard, but having health issues and joint problems and other issues because of not leading an active lifestyle is also very, very hard. Being intentional with your relationships is hard. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes strategy. But living a life without any strong relationships is also incredibly hard. Incredibly hard. Eating healthy. That's mine right there. Eating healthy is hard. It's hard, man. It is hard to eat healthy. But living a life from illnesses based on just not eating healthy is also really hard. When you live intentionally, it allows you to create the best life now. But if you live unintentionally, you're going to be forced to create that life down the road when things aren't lining up the way that you want them to be. Unintentional versus intentional living is one of the secrets that we need to learn as Christians to step into the life that God has for each and every one of us. Because God has a plan for you. You've heard Pastor Leon say it all the time. If you're breathing, God has a plan for you. And God has a plan for you when you die too. And it's an amazing plan. But I don't want to die just yet. I want to be in this world. I want to continue to advance the kingdom. I want to continue to live in peace, in joy, in strength. I want to continue to thrive in the relationships that I have. I want to continue in intentional living with everything that I do. See, but the more unintentional we are with the areas of our life, whether that's your health, whether that's your relationships, whether that's your work, whether that's your church, whatever it is, it always creeps into this last area. And that last area is your faith. Always creeps in without fail. I promise you, if you aren't intentionally choosing to live your life the way you want to, this unintentional, lukewarm side of your Christianity will start to just infect into your faith. Infect into what you do, where you go, experiencing God's promises. It leaves you in this place where now you feel alone, you feel not loved, you feel not accepted, you feel like all your problems aren't going away, and you can't seem to enjoy life the way that the Bible describes that you should. And that's not God's best for you. See, unintentional living always finds its way to faith. The second you become unintentional with your faith, you become lukewarm. And you will allow circumstances, emotions to be the deciding factor for how you experience life. I'm going to say that again. The second you become lukewarm with your Christianity, you are now going to allow circumstances and your emotions to be the guiding factor to how you experience life. And the second your emotions become your compass, you will never live a life that you're content with, ever. So I want to ask you guys, pick apart anything in your life right now. Pick apart any single relationship, any single career that you have, the church life, your volunteer life, wherever you find yourself. Start picking apart and ask yourself that question. Am I living intentionally through this, or am I living unintentionally? Am I allowing life to kind of guide me through? Am I allowing myself to feel what I allow life to feel? Am I allowing my emotions to run rampant to the point where I experience life through my uncontrolled emotions? When you start doing that, you start to realize that there's much more to be negative about in life when you allow your life to be led by your emotions. See, being unintentional is what I believe the Bible talks about when they say being lukewarm. And if you've read this verse, it comes out of Revelations 3. Verse 15 and 16, it says this: I know all the things you do, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were one or the other. He's saying, I wish you were one or the other, hot or cold. But since you are like lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. Interesting. See, everyone thinks that this is God saying that you lose your salvation when you're lukewarm. This is not what that verse is saying. This is just saying this way of living disgusts God. It just makes him go, why would you ever waste your life on being lukewarm in any area of your life? Your marriage, why get married? You can ask that to your spouse. Why would we ever get married if we're going to be a lukewarm, the way of loving each other, lukewarm of creating memories? If you only ever are unintentional in your marriage and the memories that you get, the memories that you experience are just because you happen to stumble upon a really great circumstance, and that circumstance now breeded the ground of having amazing memories within your marriage, you're never going to have a strong marriage that you want. And I believe that every single person who gets married wants to have a strong relationship, obviously. Every friendship that you get, you want that friendship to be strong. You want to help them. They want to help you. You want to have this bond that is huge. See, but when you live unintentionally, I said this already, it's like an infection. When you live unintentionally in one area, you start to step back into unintentionality, if that's a word, and you start to go into this spot where everything starts to line up in that same unintentional living to where every part of your life isn't the way that God wants it to be, isn't the plan that God has it for you. But the crazy thing about being lukewarm is the fact that we start to blame God for not experiencing the promises that he promised us because we simply just aren't doing our part in staying close to him and not allowing ourselves to back up into unintentionality, unintentional living. See, when you live unintentionally, it's like an infection. It starts to spread to every single area of your life, your relationships, your friendships, your health, your work, your finances, your faith. Name it, I promise you it will infect that area if you're not careful. And again, this message is not to discourage you. And I'm sorry if I've already discouraged you. I'll take you out of this, okay? I'll take you out of this. We're getting somewhere with this. But don't let it discourage you because that's the one thing that we got to avoid within everything with life, with being led by the emotions that we feel in the moment. We need to grab on to what God's promises are for each and every one of us rather than allowing the circumstances and the emotions of life to guide us where it wants us to go. Every single person knows that when you allow emotions into your life and you be guided by them, your life is not amazing. You are like, if you have a friend that's guided by their emotions and that's their compass, they're walking on eggshells around you all the time. You're kind of like, I'm going to just tiptoe around you because I don't want to say anything that's going to hurt you or say anything that's going to make you just outlash at me. This is all from emotional living. And that's one of the biggest things that pushes us towards lukewarm Christianity. So today I want to talk about a few things. I want to talk about just quickly 4 signs of what a lukewarm Christian looks like. Just 4 quick ones, okay? Number 1, you're content without Jesus. Number 1, you're content without Jesus. A lukewarm Christian doesn't have a desire to spend time with him in worship, in prayer, in the Bible, or even serving alongside of him. Has no desire to do that. It's not that you're choosing not to, but you're not close enough to him where you start to desire that time with him and see the experience of your life change because of the way that you believe within God and his life for you. Number 2, you ignore teaching. You don't allow others, you don't allow Holy Spirit, you don't even allow the Bible to counsel you. Everything you read, everything you set your mind on is completely confirmed, and that is exactly where you're going. You never allow yourself to step out of knowing what you know and being open to hearing more, being open to be counseled, being open to be directed to where you're going. That's number 2. Number 3, your confidence lies in your possessions, connections, and influence instead of God. Your confidence, again, confidence is a big thing. We need to get our confidence from Christ. But when we start to go in this way, where what you possess, who you're connected to, and who you influence becomes your confidence, you step away from allowing God to fill up that confidence. Number 4, you don't experience the life God promises. This is the biggest one for me. The biggest one that sticks out to me for so many people in this world is that one right there. You don't experience the life God promises. But we never, ever analyze ourselves when this happens. We don't. So many people rarely go, I wonder if I'm doing something wrong. They allow their emotions to take them to a place that they don't want to be because now they're in a completely different spot going, no, it can't be me. I read my Bible. I do this. I go to church. I tithe. I do everything that a good Christian should do, but I'm not experiencing peace, joy, strength, hope, health, prosperity, favor, blessing, everything that the Bible promises us as Christians that we should experience. So if you're not experiencing the life of your life in God's promises, that's a huge kind of indicator for me that goes, what is your relationship with Jesus about? Is there even one there? I'm sorry, I'm a little hard-hitting here. But what is that relationship? When we start to self-analyze where we're going, what we're doing, what is kind of derailing us, we start to really pick up on how we can create the best life possible with God's help. See, unintentional living is rarely an intentional choice. I'm going to say that again. Unintentional living is rarely an intentional choice. It's very rarely an intentional choice. And if it is, you got other problems, okay? I pray for you if that is. I hope it isn't. And I'm not talking about having a day where you're just laying at home. No, I'm not talking about just going for a walk and seeing where it takes you with your kids. No, that's not unintentional living. I'm talking about when you decide to do your life unintentionally, you don't care about whatever happens today happens. However I feel at work today is going to be what I get done at work today. However I feel today when I wake up is what my marriage is going to be for today. However I feel is how I'm going to treat my kids. That's the unintentional side to living that we must avoid as people. But now that we're in church, we can say as Christians, because that is not the way that God wants us to live. That's not the way that God promises us the life that we should live. He has a plan for each and every one of us. And so there's two things that happen when you become lukewarm or you become unintentional. Okay? The first one is you've fallen away so slowly that you don't even recognize your own complacency. Meaning you've become unintentional very, very slowly. And now you don't even realize you are, but you are. And now it's infected a lot of the relationship that you find yourself in. Or number two, this is a big one too, someone who is still trying to figure out how to live a life and get the best of both worlds. Where I believe in God's promises, I believe in what he says, I believe what Jesus did on the cross because it benefits me. But I don't want to believe it so much that I have to step away from my worldly living right now where I'm enjoying being out there, doing what I want to do, getting wherever I want to go. They don't want to give up either one of those lives because they both benefit them. But they never benefit you to the degree of actually experiencing the life that God has. In Revelation 3, it says hot or cold. So you're being lukewarm in your worldly life and you're being lukewarm in your faith, which means you actually have the worst of both worlds. That's what that creates. And no one realized that you have the worst. You don't choose one or the other. And when you don't choose one or the other, it is the worst thing ever. Look, I'm not saying go choose the life in the world, but I'm saying that you are the author of your life. You can take your life wherever you want to go, but then you have to be responsible for the life that you create when you make those decisions. Okay, and if you don't, and many people aren't, we live in a world right now where no one blames themselves, and I'm not saying blame yourself, but no one even analyzes what they might have done wrong. Every single person makes decisions. Every single person makes decisions they're not proud of, myself included. And sometimes I got to go, hey, you know what? I'd rather be the mistake than something I can't control. I can control myself. I can control where I'm going. I can control what I believe. I can control who I allow in my life. I can control what I do for my career. I can control which church I go to. I control how many volunteer hours I put into wherever I go. I can control those things, which is freeing to me because that means I can change my life. If you don't have that control and something in your life is always blamed on someone else, welcome to hell because you can never, ever change your life because it's this guy's fault. And in order for your life to change, this guy needs to change. Oh my goodness. That's the worst thing in the world. You never want to do that. It is the absolute worst. Okay, I'm turning my message around right now, okay? I'm going to start giving some hope, okay? But that's the thing that we need to understand with all this is that the only thing that's ever going to solve your relationship with Jesus, that lukewarm Christianity, that unintentional living, is you deciding to be hot or cold, not lukewarm. Okay, I always talk about this. I mean, I am disgusted by a hot coffee that gets to lukewarm. Like, I'm not even making this as an analogy. I genuinely, me and my wife will be enjoying coffee in the morning. On our couch, I'll have the cup of coffee, and then when it gets halfway down and then you get stuck in a really amazing conversation, you're talking, and you forget to take a sip, and then you go back to your coffee, and you're like, it's been like 40 minutes. And I get exactly what God is saying in Revelation 3 when he says, I spit you out of my mouth, because that's exactly how I feel when I sip that coffee. That's just how I feel. But the point is the way to get out of this, the way to go in there is actually choosing to be intentional with the way that you live your life. And being intentional with your relationship with God is going to create the life that God promises you. And when you experience the life that God promises you, you love spending time with God now. Because you desire it, because now you're seeing your life change in front of your eyes. There's 3 steps to becoming close to God. With the ultimate goal is to desire to spend time with God. That is the ultimate goal. That's where God wants us to be. When we desire time with him, that means the priority that we set in our life is never going to be taken over. That priority remains there, no matter how busy your life goes. you're going to spend time with God. Whether it's 5 minutes, whether it's 10 minutes, whether it's your classic 30, whatever it is that you spend time with God, you'll never miss that because you desire it. When I desire time with my wife, I never miss time with my wife. If I slip out into unintentional living, I start to go, oh yeah, we'll make memories when they make them. We'll hang out when we're less busy. No, that's not the way life should be. We should be intentional with what we do, and our intentional living with God is so, so important. So there's 3 steps I want to talk about real quickly as I close. Discover, do, desire. Discover, do, desire. That is the way that we teach ourselves to desire time with God. Number 1, discover. Okay, discovering is huge. Discovering is like when I go to the gym, let's say I'm trying to get into working out, but I don't know a whole lot. The first step to me going to the gym and learning how to work out is discovering. It's researching. It's figuring out where I'm going to go, what gym is the best, how do I work out? Do I want to hire a trainer? Do I want to figure out how to properly do these exercises so I don't hurt myself? What is my sets going to look like? How much weight am I going to go? This is the research that we do in the beginning to figure out which route we want to take. It's discovering. Okay, my favorite, the funniest thing about Discover is many people are so, like, if you get stuck on Discover, it's hilarious because your ambition for changing is enough for you. You're like, oh yeah, I got the plan to change and that's enough to fuel me. Like, I'm good. You know what I mean? You get to this point where you're like, the ambition, it's there. And I can wake up every day happy because I know that I'm striving to change, but I'm not actually changing yet. That's the ambition. That's Discover. That's when you're stuck in Discover, okay? Discovering makes you know a lot, but experience nothing. That's what Discover does. Everyone has a friend that knows everything but never experienced it, okay? And you're like, you don't know what you're talking about? Oh, okay, yeah, sounds good, but you're not close enough to really hit them hard with like, okay, stop. Like move on to the next stage, okay? Like you can't just be stuck in Discover all the time. Know-it-alls are the worst. All of us have a tendency to be a know-it-all sometimes. I'm not saying I'm not, but I'm just saying when you get stuck in discovery, your life is in a place where you don't want to be because you constantly want to change and you have a plan to change, but you haven't yet actually stepped into the plan. Number 2, do. Do and desire people get flipped all the time, every single time. If you desire McDonald's, it's most likely because you've eaten it a lot. Just putting it out there. If you desire McDonald's a lot, it's most likely because you eat a lot. The reason people don't exercise, they don't work out, they don't do that kind of thing is because they never do it long enough to desire it. They expect to desire working out, but they're not willing to do the consistent work to get to the point of desiring it, and so they never work out. And I'm in that boat sometimes too. Working out sucks. When you first start working out, it is the worst. Like you're out of breath, you're sweating, you're like, it just reminds you how out of shape you are. And you're just like, I don't know how I'm gonna go through this. I don't know where I'm gonna go. And then 3 days in, you're like, I don't see any difference. I don't feel different. I'm not losing weight yet. There's no muscle mass gaining. Like why am I even doing this, right? 3, 4 days, 5 days, a week in, 2 weeks in, you're still in that same boat. You maybe start to feel a little bit better, but you still feel a little bit crappy, let's be honest. And then you get to the point where what's going on? The reason is because you need to work out long enough to where you start to lose weight. You start to get fit. You start to see the mirror change, it feels like, and you start to see muscle mass, or you start to see yourself getting toned or whatever it is. And this is just an analogy based on those that care about working out. I'm not pushing that on anyone. I'm just saying in that moment, if we don't do it long enough to where we desire it, you're never going to stay consistent with it. Ever. And so step 2 has to be do. And if you don't do it, you're never going to desire. And that's the same thing with our relationship with God. Discover, then you do. That means you spend time with God. That means even though you don't feel like it, you do it. That means even though you feel like you didn't have a great devotional time, you do it. That means even though because you sing in praise and worship on a Sunday and you hate the sound of your voice, doesn't mean you stop, okay? It's okay. Not everyone's singers. That's okay. But you get into this habit where you start to do it and do it and do it and do it and do it until the time where you get to the now just spot where you're like, oh, wow, I'm doing this so much, I'm actually seeing change in my life. I'm actually experiencing God's promises. And when you start to experience God's promises, you desire to spend time with him because you're like, oh my goodness, what he says in his word is true. And I need to stick to this. And then comes desire. Desire is amazing. In any form of your life, desiring is so good. Why? Because you don't need to be motivated. Everyone always asks me, not everyone, that's a completely blown out of proportion statement. I've gotten the question at times, okay? I've gotten the question at times where someone says, how do you stay motivated in what you do? And I'm like, I don't. I make a consistent decision to show up. And that is it. And then you make that decision going, I know I'm not going to be motivated, but even when I'm not motivated, I'm telling myself right now, I am going to show up, because that is what happens and is the secret to getting you to desire. Is going, I don't feel like doing devotions today. I don't feel like talking to God right now, but I'm still going to. Why? Because I made this decision. You should make a pact with yourself, a promise to yourself that you will never break. We make it with every single other person in our life. If someone says, keep this secret, or someone says, hey, I'm telling you this in confidence, or whatever it might be, we're like, yeah, absolutely. I got your back no matter what, but we don't got ourselves. We don't even make that pact with ourselves. We're like, oh yeah, it's good, it's great, but I don't know. I wasn't motivated today. And then you start to, like that point one, I've had multiple different point ones, but the second point one, okay, that said you're just unknown with your complacency, where you just slowly step back and you don't know you're stepping back. That's what happens when you're in between do and desire, and you lose motivation, but you decide to follow your motivation. Motivation is just a feeling. And if we continue to allow our feelings to guide us, it's going to put us in a spot that we do not want to be in. See, discover, do, desire. You guys are in discover right now. If you don't find you're in doing right now, you're in discover. You're at church, you're hanging out, you're making friends, you're doing those things in your life that where you should be in discover, but don't stop there. Otherwise, you're going to be just someone that goes to church for a few months and then it loses your interest in it, because you're kind of like, it's okay. Didn't really change my life. Well, it's because you stayed in discover. Start to go to the do, where your life begins to change because you start to actually spend time in his word. And then you begin to desire, because God's promised life for you begins to be experienced in your life. And that is I can't even explain how amazing that is. So the only way to stop to be a lukewarm Christian is to find joy in studying. But joy isn't just a feeling that comes. It comes from doing. It comes from stepping into God's word. It comes from spending time with him. And it comes from actually being intentional with that relationship with God.